So I listened to a podcast the other day. It was about numerology as a recovery tool. So interesting. And this kind of goes along with the shadow work and the karmic numbers that we've been doing. And that's what I was researching. So this was with numerologist Sylvia Arreo. And Sylvia is a psychologist slash numerologist. She was very interested in how the numbers affected each person and how this worked into counseling with them, which I find very interesting. Um, yeah, so she saw the emotional patterns that happened with each person. How about that? With their numerology, even more interesting. So and also, I gotta say, I was fascinated because Sylvia also talked of ways that of healing people, which I found to be really fascinating. So let's take a look at the possibility of this numerology tool for sensing trauma and maybe some other mental illnesses or disorders, however you really want to put it, and recovery. That's fascinating. So, hi, all. It's Lori from Numerology with Lori. Please like and subscribe and click the bell icon drop down to all so that you don't have to let YouTube decide for you which videos you're going to watch. So, thank you very much. Also, keep in mind, by the way, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. I can do a numerology reading for you. I can I can get your five core numbers ready for you. We can talk about some of the positive and negative features of the number, especially now that we're doing all this shadow work. I feel like this is going to go into the readings a little bit more. So yeah, this would be a fascinating time to get a reading. Anyway, check out my website at loriintuitivenumerologist.com. Thank you. So we talked about shadow numbers and karmic numbers, but then I did more research. And wow, did I find out some interesting information. So I'd like to share all of these nuances with you all. So let's go there. So let's see. Let me give you, we didn't talk about this. One of the things that I researched was coded patterns. And I heard about this on the numerology podcast with Sylvia as well. So coded patterns are in the numbers. They're in each person's numerology numbers. So to give you some background, about 4,000 years ago, and I did some other research. It wasn't in the podcast, but there was lots of Google searches and other articles that I read. But I kept coming across this one specific item, and it was that 4,000 years ago, there was a grid pattern discovered in China somewhere. I think it was a river, the Luau River or something like that. And but it was on the back of a turtle. How fascinating is this? And this tool is used numerologically in a couple of different numerology methods still today. So you figure if this was found 4,000 years ago, it had to have been used long before that, which I find really cool. Anyway, we'll do a separate video on all of that, but I thought it was worthy of the mention here since it is kind of fascinating. So yeah, so this is used today. Yes, we just talked about that. So these patterns provide a blueprint that we can look for during a numerology consultation and or reading. So this type of thorough research can eventually allow a person to gain the power to live their best life. I find that really fascinating. I hope you guys do too. So let's see what these patterns possibly could reveal. Let's just go over a list of some of the emotional patterns that we sense. We can sense anxiety, We can sense some OCD. We can sense brain fog, mood swings, depression. All of these things I have experienced somewhat myself. I've been to counseling, and I think a lot of you have too, especially that are in interested in researching some of this shadow work with me. Um, yeah, panic attacks, controlling behavior, people who find change very difficult. Mhm. Breathing issues. So you say to yourself, well, what's a breathing issue? Well, some people during a traumatic experience can they have like a hyperventilation that happens, or they have trouble breathing because they get very excited. Maybe they're pre-anxiety, or maybe it's part of their anxiety. So these are all things that I'm just reading as a list of possible solution or possible um, events that might happen, as far as your emotional pattern. So interesting. This is just naming a few items. These can be associated with trauma in the specific lifetime that you're living, or it's just the way that a person deals with difficult situations. That's interesting too. Not to say, not that it downplays it, because that's not really true, but you may have specific ways that you deal with situations that you don't recognize as being different because you've always dealt with it that way, or that's something that in this particular life has been with you since day one. So you are not seeing it as something different until it becomes debilitating. That's when it becomes harder to deal with. Okay. So what do we know about the numbers? One really important thing that I Googled about the numbers, that they're part of a spectrum. Isn't that interesting? And it makes perfect sense to me. So it ranges from balanced to unbalanced. So yeah, we have this spectrum. And the reason that I say that that makes sense to me, so a long time ago, I remember hearing about autism. And I was a young mother. And I remember thinking that, wow, and hearing that it ran on that autism was kind of a spectrum. So you could have none of it, or you could have a little, or you could have the whole gamut of the symptoms of autism. And I guess part of me thought, well, how come just autism? Like that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And then as I got studying about numerology, I began to see that there were certain tendencies, like for instance, and I think many of you know this, and I've talked about this, that I have been to AA and I have given up alcohol, and that's been for the past 18, almost 19 years. So one of the things that I thought about is, are there specific numbers that kind of show alcoholism? And I will have another video on this because I did listen to it was actually on NPR, I think. It was there was a gentleman talking. Oh, he was from England, from London, England, and his name was Charles Knowles. So that's all I have. But he did talk about alcoholism and how, not numerology. I'm the one associating it with numerology. So what I want to do is do a little bit more of a search on specifically people who might have a tendency towards alcoholism. And it has been mentioned in some readings for like master number 11, for any kind of like an excessive amount of threes. I've seen it in three zeros. So when that happens, I just tell people to beware of it. Beware of addiction. That's all. Be careful with it. That's all. Make sure you know that it's something that could come up in your life. Okay, that's where we go with it. So let's see what this could mean. And we're going to look at the numbers specifically. And we're going to see if there are any traits in each number that that might be an issue for us for leading to some of these mental disorders, which I consider alcoholism to be a mental disorder. It at least that's what I think. Everybody has a different opinion. So let's look at the number one. We'll start there. So this can be characterized by leadership, by independence, and I love the number one. I am a number one. So is our other members of my family. And so I look at this number one and I think, okay, so they also, this is something that I've learned, and I can tell you, yes, this is true. There's a tendency to suppress their feelings. I know this because I suppress my own. I sit there and say, no, 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 doesn't apply to me. And then I find out a few years later, yes, it does. So we have a tendency to suppress our feelings and we push through burnout to maintain control. How about that? I can tell you of another member of my family right now that's pushing through burnout that has to remind themselves that sometimes they need to take a break. That's all there is to it. Sometimes you just need to take a break. So let's see, we're going to move on because I feel like I have a lot to cover in this, and I don't want to keep you guys forever, but it is a longer video. So, number two, this has empathy and high sensitivity as a plus. We also know that twos are representative of cooperation, of balance, of harmony. So, this suggests, though, that the emotional end of it suggests there's a need to guard against absorbing other people's emotions. That's very true. Because if you're empathic at all, so empathy and high sensitivity, that's some of the things that are positive number twos, okay? But sometimes you have to guard against being too empathic. You have to it's like almost I need to be alone. I need to be alone so I can just deal with some of these emotions. Things are getting to me too much. And you have to kind of learn how to be not, how do I want to put it, not codependent. Maybe taking a look at codependencies is there are 12-step programs, there are other mental health issue programs for codependency. Take a look at that. See if that helps you if you have these issues going on with a number two, your number two. So there's also a tendency to prioritize social harmony over personal boundaries. This kind of goes along with guarding against other people's emotions because when you let your personal boundaries go, it that's tough. It's very tough. It's tough to you need to have boundaries in place in order to feel like the person that you were meant to be. All right, let's move on. Number three. Number three is about creativity. We know this, communication, self-expression. The patterns, emotional patterns lean towards talking things out, but also dealing with blocked expression. Ooh, that's interesting. They can also display nervous system resilience, restlessness when they're under stress. And the reason that we talked about this recently was if you haven't watched it and you're interested in celebrity numerology, we did a reading on Tom Hiddleston recently, and he plays Loki on the Marvel. That's probably the best. He's done so many things, but anyway, regardless, he's got a three going on all over the place. He even has three. He's even got threes in the third and fourth pinnacle of his pinnacles, as well as I think his destiny number and maybe personality number. So I'd have to look at it again to be positive. But the fact is that one of the things that was mentioned for him is he's got to be careful of dealing with too much anxiety, like dealing with too much, that whole burnout syndrome. It's like, is that giving him a tendency towards anxiety? Is that giving him a restlessness under stress? We don't know. But it's something to think about when somebody has more than 1 3 in their numbers. It's definitely something to think about. And like I said, if you feel that you would like to have me do the numbers for somebody that you know, or a child, a sibling, a spouse, yourself, feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to do that. Lori, intuitivenumerologist.com. Reach out to me there. So then we have the number 4. So the number 4 is rooted in structure and practicality. This we know to be true. It's a hardworking number. We know that. So the emotional pattern shows a tendency to intellectualize their feelings, mm, or react to change with rigid control. So this can be the number 4. When you have a 4 in your life, I've seen this before with people. I've specifically seen it with people who have a 22 4. So that's a master number, 22. So the 2 plus 2 equals 4. So the life path number is actually a 4, but it's formulated from the 22. So all of the numbers in their birth date add across to 22. So, yeah, I've seen that happen before. I've seen this specific rigidity, especially with controlling their surroundings, controlling what goes on around them. So, yeah, that can be the 4. The 5 is as we know, it's about freedom and adaptability. Okay, this is very true. Um, the emotional pattern uses distraction to avoid deeper emotional discomfort and occasionally bouts of restlessness. Mm. So the 5 can be about that. The 5 usually is about freedom and change and an adventure. It's wonderful. But if there's a lot of 5 going on, a lot of 5 energy, it can be destructive. So so they, again, it uses distraction to avoid deeper emotional discomfort and occasional bouts of restlessness. That's very true. All right, let's move on to number 6. So number 6 is also kind of an empathic number, but it's more family oriented. So it's empathic with the people that surround you, make up your family, um, domestic life, and nurturing. It's a very or I would say, not self anything, I'm so sorry, but a serving number, which, so you could be a nurse. You might be, anybody, like a teacher. A teacher could have a 6 going on. Um, but the patterns include emotional blind spots, strong tendencies to overgive, leading to feelings of exhaustion or emotional martyrdom. So keep that in mind. And again, look into codependency. So we talked about it for the 2. We're also going to talk about it for the 6. Interestingly enough, both of them have empath in their positive um, traits. The personality traits. So it's interesting to me. And the only reason that I know about this is because when you go to a 12-step program, you kind of learn about them all. So, and I, yeah, I feel like checking into codependency is a good way of dealing with some of the issues that you might be feeling with having a 6 when they're not always positive. Okay. So when you're feeling a little bit more of that spectrum happening, maybe it will behoove you to check out There are books, so you don't even have to go to a 12-step program, but you can read a book about it. Go online and check out, what does codependency mean? What can this do for me? Yeah, it might help. So now we're going to move on to the number seven. So the seven is about intuition, it's about analytical thought, it's about research, that kind of thing. So the emotional pattern involves heavy overthinking. Ugh, we can see how this would be the truth. And it's also internalizes your feelings, resulting in emotional withdrawal or even isolation. And all of this makes sense with a seven. If you find yourself going for any of these things, or if any of this means something to you, please either be in touch with somebody who can do some counseling for you, whether it's seeing a numerologist and getting involved in that, or seeing an analyst, somebody that can help you, a counselor that can help you actually get through some of this stuff. Yeah. Especially the sevens, because they are a little bit less inclined to, I don't know. I just think that a counselor would be a good idea for somebody who has a seven life path, or seven in their numbers, that's dealing with some of these issues. So the next number we're going to talk about is an eight. So as we know, eights have to do with power, material success, very true, finances, business, that kind of thing. But it also, the patterns can involve emotional responses that are often masked by strong focus on achievement, the hidden struggles that are there for achievement, like achievement orientation that is like overblown. It's sometimes it's again a burnout thing. That this is maybe similar to a five, but take a second and relax into where you are, and maybe make a list. But at the very least, you can take care of some of these triggers. And also it might help you to see a counselor, or a numerologist, somebody that will help you kind of walk through some of your issues and help you deal with that. So then we're going to move on to the last number, and the last number is a number nine. So we know that a lot of the number nine issues, or good issues, good personality traits, are about humanitarianism and completion. So the emotional pattern is characterized by deep compassion, but it also has a heavy susceptibility to emotional overload and absorbs the collective trauma. Oh, that makes perfect sense because of the humanitarian nature of a nine. So it makes sense that if you see something happening, maybe in your community, maybe globally, that it just causes you to cry and be, you have no control over this, but it still doesn't mean that you don't want to. You don't want to. So yeah, I mean, emotional overload makes perfect sense. And it could have something to do with that absorbing of the collective trauma. It would lead you to an emotional overload. That makes perfect sense. So while you're a humanitarian at heart, you can't always get it done, but it's good to know that sometimes you just need to take a look at sometimes you just need to take a look at the spectrum and the balance and the overbalance that's happening with your particular numbers. So anyway, so so can we talk about some preliminary solutions? So one of the first things that I came across was journaling. Journaling is it's been recommended to me forever. And I find that I do some, and then I stop, and then I do some. But it doesn't matter if it's just And plus, okay, so one of the things that back in the 80s there was a pink book that one of the things was, and I can't remember what it was called, but one of the things that was recommended was journaling of five gratitude. Like it could be, okay, today I woke up and I was breathing. That's number one. Number two could be there were birds outside my window. Number three could mean I love the feel of my dog's fur. I mean, and so on like that. That could be those could be three of the five. Um, but it got you into the habit of just putting pen to paper every day. So yeah, journaling is a great tool for helping you figure out what's happening. So one of the things that I really liked about this, so maybe you're seeing or noticing sequences of numbers. And I can't be the only one. At my friend Marla and I, and she may be watching today. So Marla, here you go. Shout out to you. But we see sequences of numbers all the time. Usually, we call them angel numbers. Sometimes we look them up that so we see 222 or 777. Um, so one of the things that was suggested to me, and I did share this with her when I saw it because it excited me, and I thought, oh, I'm going to definitely put this in the video. So you could list the time that you notice the number, okay? The actual sequence. So if it was a 222 that you saw at 222, or you might have seen a two somewhere else. Let's say you saw it in a grocery store. I know that's one of the things that Marla does, and she'll say, "Oh, I saw at the Publix here in Florida today a 222." So, but I never thought to ask her, "Well, what time did you see it?" Now I think that's an interesting thing to know. Not to only what time did she see it, but the other thing that I noticed was the state of your mind at the time that you saw the number. So what does that mean? Like, okay, let's say I saw a 222. Was I feeling cooperative and balanced, or was I feeling like I needed the reminder in that? Was I feeling like isolated and like I needed to get out with people? And maybe that's why I saw the 222 because the 222 reminds me a little bit of cooperation, balance, harmony, but on a broader, more spiritual scale. So that could be one of the things that we journal about. Interesting. It's just interesting to think about. So eventually you might see the underlying emotional theme or pattern of your own thinking. Interesting to think about, isn't it? Wow. I love this. I really like this idea. Maybe you can begin the process of letting go or seeking comfort through some form of counseling. And again, I am open to all of you guys. If you feel like you need to start this discussion, start it with me and I can recommend that you start with somebody else if it's something it's more than I can handle or more that we can handle together. So, let's talk about another form of therapy. We talked a little bit about journaling. Okay. So then how about art therapy? Have you ever thought of that? I there's a blog that I read. And the name of this person was Ksenia, and I know I'm going to butcher this name, so please forgive me, but it's Ksenia, Ksenia, maybe Ksenia, Odinstova, Odinstova. So she has mostly it's an art website, but she does have blogs that she writes as well. And this particular blog that she wrote was more, the numerology was based on the number nine, which was interesting to me. It was very interesting. But what I really found that was interesting was her description of the colors and the the methods she used for creating art around numerology. Oh, wow. And I loved that I do know that people use art therapy for healing their emotional patterns and their mental um, issues. It's not really issues, it could be their disorders. We talked about that already. Sorry, I forgot the word already. So she has a lot of posters and art that's on her website. And if you Google, I don't have her website written down here, but if you Google her name, that's Ksenia, Ksenia, I feel like I'm butchering, Odinstova, Odinstova. There's so much to learn about our personality traits by drawing and other artistic endeavors. So true. So true. I mean, I think the idea is to just begin. Just begin. Interesting. So one of the most important things that I learned while researching these powerful therapy tools was that emotional release is a movement that quietly returns. That I found through the art blog. It's a movement that quietly returns. That's emotional release. Release. So it's a solution. Art therapy as a solution says this particular blog talked about emotional release is a movement that quietly returns. In other words, do not try to erase your feelings. Allow them to settle and remain flexible. That blew me. Maybe you're not having the same reaction as I did. I'm not sure, but I felt like that really spoke to me, that particular line. So let me say it in other words. In other words, do not try to erase your feelings. I love that. Soften, not disappear. And she was talking specifically about colors, but it feels like it means something for everything. I got chills. So when you're going to talk about, like, you don't need to eliminate something in your life that let's say a number represents. Let's say it's a number three, and it's talking about nervous system restlessness when under stress. So we what do we do? We're going to take that stress that we feel and learn to meditate, learn to journal about it, maybe do some art therapy about it. We're going to take these different tools and work them out, and we're going to suddenly have less stress about it. And now we're making it softer. You see, we're making the stress softer. We're not disappearing our emotion because that's negating the reason for the emotion. Oh, I'm sorry. Whew. Yeah. So remember the ancestral ties that may bring about these patterns. This I found really fascinating. And some of this is my own, well, it all is my own, but I have in quotation marks anything that I use from her website. But specifically the ancestral ties, I've been thinking about this. And the one thing that I remember, and not to keep bringing this back to myself, but with the alcoholism, our our generation, this generation, my generation, was the first generation to attempt, and I say we have all made attempts to let go of it, to say that's it, done. We're done. And are we blessed because Alcoholics Anonymous is in our life and there's more known about alcoholism? Maybe. Maybe that's why. Maybe we're in this life, this time to work on this issue. I don't know. I don't know. But I will say that I do know that this has lots of family ties ancestrally. There are lots of people that have been dealing with this same emotional pattern. I don't know that they didn't give it up, but I know that there's been a pattern. There's been a pattern. That's where it came from. And it's on both sides of my family. So how does that make you feel? Not the alcoholism, just in general. So How about your patterns? How does that make you feel? I, for one, felt joined in a way I can't describe. I felt loved for trying to break a pattern. Hmm. Loved by my ancestors. Oh my gosh. There's so much more here, and I plan to keep researching, and I hope you'll keep joining me. Blessed be, loves. Thank you so much for joining me today.